Hi, and thanks for joining me. We're going to look at the Folomov EDC C2 flashlight today. So this was provided to me by the company Folomov for free, and I get to keep it. So there's my little disclosure. These little marks just happened about 10 minutes ago as I tried to take this off using, well, not the appropriate tool, but basically I've just added them. This was new in the box, and here's some photos of it in the box. Everything you need to use it is in this nice steel tin box. So you get 2 spare O-rings and the micro USB cable to charge the rechargeable battery that's within the flashlight. Because I didn't want to film the unboxing while I was at work when it arrived, because my co-workers mocked me enough already. Anyway, this is a new-ish light. It uses the high CRI from now. I will get this wrong, I suspect, but it's either Nichia or Nikia. I've only ever seen it written, never said. So however you pronounce it. It's a 3000K emitter, and it uses the E21A LED. So you get a very warm light out of this. I've never actually seen a warm white light before, except for, what are they called? Incandescents. So I know a couple of companies make them, but I've just never seen them. So if you take a look, it's just got that nice, beautiful coloring to it. I really like staring at the tint from this. It's rather beautiful. So physically, it's 55 millimeters long. I think that's just over 2 inches. We use the metric system. I'm not going to learn imperial. So, yeah, 55. And it's 18 millimeters in diameter. So I checked this one previously. Obviously, it depends whereabouts you put it, but 17 to 18 millimeters. Now, its main competitor, I suspect, would be the Olight S1 Mini. You'll notice that this is actually slightly longer than the S1 Mini, but it's way, way thinner. So the reason it's longer, the S1 Mini uses a optic. So there's no actual reflector. It's just a piece of plastic that focuses the beam. This one, the EDC C2, uses an actual reflector rather than an optic, and that shows in the little bit of extra throw you get. I don't know if you'll see it here, but you'll see it in the beam shots later. Just you get a bit more. Actually, let's just do this. You get that. Turn off the lights. I've seen it when you when I actually use it, so you'll see it more on the beam shots later. But you get a bit more flood here, and this, while still relatively floody, you get that defined hot spot a bit more, and I quite like that. And this actually shows you the tints as well as a difference. Let me just get the S1R2 there as well. So yeah, the two on the left use optics, the one on the right uses a lens and a reflector, so you get a little bit more throw. Cool. So bring it back on. Let me just turn off the ridiculous number of lights that are now on in my room. Alright, so you get a magnet on its butt, as is pretty much included on the tunnel lights today, so that's really handy. It's pretty stable. Then again, it's a tiny, tiny light, so it doesn't have much weight, which is really handy. There's a lot of lights that are 1850 and above. They're adding magnets to them now, which is fine when you're holding it like this, but the second you put it sideways, it'll just slide down and fall off. With lights of this size, perfectly fine. So the other reason it's a competitor to the S1 Mini is, and this is the reason why it's so small. S1 Mini will use a 16340. So I actually have some batteries of different types here. It's a AAA, and this is a 16340. So the RCR 123A. If you're getting into this, you've got CR 123A, which is the disposable version, and RCR 123A, which is the rechargeable version. On top of that, if you ever hear someone mention a 16340, that's just referring to this form factor basically. So technically anything that is, whether it's CR123 or RCR 123. They're both 16340s. Functionally, whenever someone's mentioning a 16340, they probably mean the rechargeable version. Now, this refers to their dimensions. So I think 34 millimeters this way and 16 millimeters this way. Now this has built-in micro USB-C charging. So there's this tiny little thing. So you get a tiny little 14300 battery instead. So 300 millimeters, 14 millimeters. But it's still got, I haven't actually measured the battery. That's just a nominal form factor. So that's for the 300, which includes the button. That's the 14. Just realized you might not be able to see it. Yay, white balance. There you go. Sorry, exposure settings. Anyway, 250 milliamp hour battery. So very small, fairly low capacity. I would say 20 to maybe 30 minutes of comfortable light. Although this battery, the way this light works with it, once it gets to under 10%, it only lets you use the low and moonlight options. So you kind of, you can limp home with it at the end of the day. I'll get to some other things about that in a minute. But basically, you charge it. It's got a little indicator light just there. It'll go green when it's fully charged, red while it's charging. Yay, autofocus. My main concern, and I think some of you will have already thought this the second you saw it, it's one of those blue batteries. There's no discernible maker on it. If you look at Keep Power batteries, I think eFest some people like, the Olight batteries, they all come from known reputable manufacturers. There's generally not an issue with them. For the company branded ones like Olight, for example, there's that trust of the company that people have, so it's kind of okay because you're fairly certain they sourced a good battery. This one doesn't have the maker's mark, doesn't have, Folomov doesn't have the company they made it at. That concerns some people, and me included on that. I don't know what this battery is. I will say it's never had a single problem. It's worked perfectly fine every time, but a lot of people, sorry, I thought that was a knock on my door. A lot of people have that concern with batteries like this, so just something to be aware of. It's got a spring at one end, but not the other. And it's got an O-ring, so it's 2 meters waterproof. Now, let's do a quick user interface check. When it's on, this will let you know how much juice you got remaining. See how it's green? Turns red when you got a problem, basically. So part of the reason this light is actually really, really interesting is I think I've only ever seen 2 other lights with this feature. They use such small batteries like 16340s or 14300s, and that would be the EagleTac D25 series and the Claris XT1C. There's probably others, I just can't think of them. With one of them, you tighten the head and you get tactical mode, where it's only like, turbo and strobe. The other one is very similar. This, though, is the first time I've seen a side button light implement tactical mode. And I'll show you tactical mode first, actually. So you do 7 clicks. Pretty sure that was 7, yep. Then you get 7 flashes. When it's in tactical mode, you hold it. You get momentary light on. You let go. No light. So you get momentary. Now, if you want the light to stay on, you just click it. Clicked. It's on. Click it, turns off. If you hold it, turns off. So very simple. You touch it, it's going to turn on. Touch it again, it turns off. If you want strobe, you double click. Turns off. Nice and straightforward. They call it tactical mode. Look, the most tactical thing I'm ever going to do is try and sneak an extra caramel slice without my significant partner noticing and reminding me that I'll probably die an early death with the amount of them that I love. So I don't think I'd consider this tactical from my perspectives at all. Certainly someone might need the whole peek around the corner, but let's face it, if you're doing tactical, you're probably going to go for an Elzetta or Surefire or whatever, and you're going to be doing your things. For me, the main reason that's a really good mode is for somebody like my mum, who, she doesn't really want to mess around with modes. I enjoy playing with these. These are essentially toys for me that, perform well, but I play with them. And with my mum, she's going to want to I want light. I don't want light. Nice and easy to use. It removes a lot of the options, but if you're going to give it to someone who just needs to get some light out and then wants the light to stop, much better. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Cool. So now it's back in normal mode. In that mode, you hold it down, you get moonlight, and then you push it to cycle through the modes. Hold it to turn it off. Very similar to a lot of the side button user interfaces now. But the difference between some is on some you push it and then you hold it and it ramps through the modes, and then you let go when you're at the mode you want, which is handy. But the downside is it's like missing your exit on a highway. You gotta then wait till you can use it again. With this one, set it on, push your button, get the mode you want. Done. Turn it off. See how you get through those 3 modes? Low, medium, high, over and over again. There's actually another mode. So you can access it from anywhere, but double click, you get turbo, and that was from high to turbo just then. So you can access that mode from off, or while it's on any other mode. Yeah, so it's got mode memory as well. Cool. But basically, anytime you want, you've got instant access to moonlight and high, like the turbo high. So that's always handy for me. I like the fact that even though there's one button, I can get to the highest setting and the lowest setting. And then if you want, you can decide on a different mode. So that's pretty cool. The other things. I decided to test the runtime. There's a couple of ways I did it that are contradictory to each other. The first one is I put it on turbo, put it in a box with a hole, and put my phone at the other side as a light meter and measured the candela output. So basically that peak beam intensity, the brightest it gets there, I measured that. There's standardized ways to do it. So this wasn't to measure the total peak beam intensity. They already published those figures somewhere. For me, it was to look at how the output decreases over time. So what I did is I turned it on and I had it on turbo, pointed down. In the first instant it comes out, it was at around 4200 lumens, but it was fluctuating heavily. It dropped down to about 2400 lumens and stabilized at 1 minute. Came back and took another look at 10 minutes. It had dropped to 1700. By about 22 minutes, it was at 1500. And then by about 32 minutes, I think it was at 190. So functionally, look, you're looking at around 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how you use your light. I wouldn't, use it more than that really, without recharging. I also decided to then do a voltage check. So the reason this is different, for the candela check, I put it on turbo and just left it. So it's gonna just drop however it drops, but it'll just lose brightness along the way. When you do the voltage checks, by definition, every time you're measuring the voltage, you're taking it apart, measuring the battery, putting it back together, and then I put it back on turbo. So the brightness would have gone up when it turns on, dropped a bit as it did whatever, being measured, and then jump up a bit. And that means it's by running it at the highest possible setting it can do at each time you turn it back on, you're going to diminish the battery. So these are the graphs. So keeping in mind that I was putting it on turbo in between every measurement, so that you get a bit less runtime, I guess. But you can see it starts at about 4.22 volts, and then after about 10 minutes drops to 3.71 volts. Progressively keeps dropping until around that 35-minute mark, where you get to about 2.7 volts. Then it slowly decreases, settling in around the 2.6 region. But by 65 minutes, it was at 256 volts, so 2.56 volts. And then it had died before my next measurement. So you get about, 20 to 30, maybe 20 to 40 minutes, depending on how you're using it.
which is pretty decent for a light of this brightness and form factor. I was actually surprised, but it does, decrease brightness as the battery diminishes, so just keep that in mind, but it's a good little pocket light.
Alright, so this is the Folomov EDC C2. So that's low, medium, that's high, and double click, basically turbo. And for comparison, we'll grab the Olight S1 Mini because it's fairly well known. So let's just cycle back. Cool. Low, medium, high, turbo. So you'll see that the Olight's got a more diffused beam pattern, whereas the Folomov, it's still, relatively floody, but it's a bit more concentrated. It's also got this neutral white beam, warm white beam, versus the neutral white, for example, on the Olight S1 Mini. So let's look at the physicality and a couple of issues I encountered. The main ones for me, this clip I think is very flimsy for my belt. So I use my lights on my belt. I use the S1R2 on my belt. It stays fine most of the time. It's come off once or twice. This thing would come off once every 1 or 2 days. However, again, I put it on my belt. If you put it on a pocket, you might not have as bad a time, especially if it's inside your pocket. Now, when putting it, I tested this out in my pocket a little bit, and I pummeled the other side of it a few times while it was in my pocket, and it never turned on. On my belt, however, it was pressing against, I guess, a chair. If my bag hit it, if my jacket compressed on it, it turned on again once every 1 to 2 days. And the downside of this was I wouldn't notice until like I could feel the heat of it after a little while. So it does heat up a little bit, but it's never painful. Maybe just a little bit uncomfortable at times. So once or twice when I've come to use this, the battery's actually been dead because it had turned on and I didn't realize that. But you can check it, and I grew to just start checking it whenever I picked it up. I'll just do a quick check on how much battery it had left. It'll go red when the battery's lower. But just something to consider. Am I gonna EDC it? Probably not. I really love the tint, but for me, there's 2 things I'm deciding on. I'm either gonna put it in my study because I love this warm white tint. It's absolutely beautiful. It's one of the nicest tints I've ever seen. It just makes it happy to look at things, especially indoors and on plants and green, for example. So I quite like how this blue looks. And I'm also rather fond of how my skin tone appears under this light. It's quite nice. Yeah, so for me, I might not carry it. Well, let me rephrase. I won't be carrying it. But I still like it. So I'd like to keep it in my study. The other thing I'm thinking is I might put it on tactical mode and give it to my mum because her light's kind of gone kaput. I'm just trying to decide on whether this side button will be a problem for her if it activates in her bag, but I'll test that out. So they're the 2 things I might do with it. It's a cool little light, but I tend to prefer my S1R2, so I don't carry the S1 mini baton either. I took it traveling once, but this is in my fiance's bag. I've borrowed it for testing against this. But I like the ease of flicking this onto a charger, and even though it's not 100% perfect, this clip holds on fairly well. It's a bit deeper, really, and it's also reversible. For my needs, I tend to prefer this one, but the fact that this is so tiny, I'd constantly forget I had it on me, to be honest. Which, the converse side of that is that sometimes if it fell, I wouldn't have realized that my fiance not pointed it out to me. So I can't remember if I showed you, but the magnet works fine. And with 18650s, you'll find that they'll fall because they're too heavy, but with 16340 and below, these hold on perfectly fine. That magnet's actually really useful. Future iterations of this light, I would suggest they rework the clip they recess this. For the last 5 years, most lights like this coming out get recessed, and I would suggest they look at any way to charge it without disassembling it. Yeah, so that's basically this light. You get 400 lumens of awesome 3000K warm white brightness, dropping fairly steadily for 20 to 30 minutes usable light. It's a good little light to have in your pocket. My general rule for lights is I'll carry something like a 16340 or small light if I'm going out and I don't think I'll be out stuck in the dark, for example. If I'm going out, I don't know when I'll be back, and I've got a jacket or a bag, I'll chuck in it used to be an 18650. Now I've got a, whatever it is, the Olight Seeker 2 uses, the big chunky one. But for most of the time, I'll end up using a light like this because it's on my belt. So yeah, it's available for, I think it's about $35 compared to about $50, and these are US prices for the Olight S1 Mini. Which one would I suggest you buy? That's entirely personal preference. For me, I really like build quality on Olight, and the whole reputable manufacturer that I've heard of is commonplace. I think the overall design and just the build and thought out nature of the S1 Mini is better, but that tactical mode and the fact that it's got a nice warm white tint, and
being able to include a reflector in a light of this size is pretty awesome because it means you get that little bit more throw. And of course, both lights have micro USB charging, which is really handy when you're on the go.
Oh, the other thing I'd suggest that they upgrade is put in a known battery. I know that 14300s aren't commonly made, I guess, but they should probably invest in it. I think it's a really promising light. And yeah, like I'd be happy to buy things as a curiosity. And I'd certainly be willing to have bought this. I don't regret it. I got it for free, admittedly. But for 35 US, it's what, about $50? Well, I'd be happy to. If you're more considering you want one solid, reliable quality light, and you don't want to mess around, you don't want to risk it, blah blah blah, something like this might be a bit better. But if you want to, see some warm white tints and some cool features for a pretty reasonable price, this is actually a pretty good entry level torch. It reminds me of what are they called, the budget light forum lights. One of those. This would work quite well as something like that. But yeah, thanks.